Thank you. Thank you for this fireside chat. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was fond of saying, a moment's insight is sometimes worth a lifetime of experience. But sometimes the best insights do come from experience. Our guest has over half a century of unmatched business experience, which has given some unique insights to him on managing money, managing men, and managing markets. One can learn from him not only about valuations, the kind you need to find good stocks, but also on values, the kind you need to lead a great life. It's a great privilege and honor for me to have a chat with the Toronto, Canada-based chairman of Fairfax Financial Holdings, Prem Watsa. Prem, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. You're very kind. Thank you.
You know, Prem, we're roughly the same age. I'm also 60 plus. When we were growing up, it said, go west, young man. You actually went west, so did I. I want to ask our audience, is that if they were 25 and had a chance to go to the west or stay in India, what would they do? How many of you would go to the west today? Scattering. People have taken your advice seriously, Prem. Great. Suppose you were 25 today, Prem. 25 again.
Yeah.
That'd be nice, of course. But would you go to...
No, I think, I got to tell you, Ramesh, even when I left, I was 22 years old. I had done my engineering. I'd met my wife to be, Nalini is right in front. I'm married for 44 years now. I didn't want to leave. But my dad had said, my brother had gone to Canada, and he said, you should go. So, in India, you tend to listen to your dad.
Father knows
at that time, perhaps not today, but at that time. And so he said I should go, and I did go. But I think today, you're exactly right. The opportunity is here, and it'll be more obvious over time. First term for Mr. Modi ends in 19. I'm thinking he gets another term, and another term after that, Ramesh, and the sentiment in India would have changed dramatically.
The Congress is not too happy about what you're saying, but whatever. You talked about your father, Prem,
yeah.
And you've often talked in your interviews about winning the ovarian lottery.
Yes.
What were the early influences in your life, and how did they shape the person you've become today?
My father was an orphan in this country, in India, in the 1920s. My father and mother died when he was 2 and 3. And by the 10, his grandfather looked after him and grandmother. And by the 12, 13, 14, they died. And he said his world ended. No one, there were 4 in their family. They were split. 2 brothers and 2 sisters. One brother went here, one brother went to another family. And his world ended. And that family basically never reunited. But from that time, my father was a good sportsman, good cricket player, good in all sorts of sports, went and got educated. Those days, got a bachelor of, a BA, and then I got a bachelor of education, master of education, became a teacher. Those days, he would hustle. He was in Hyderabad, then he moved to Pune, he became a principal of a school and a teacher's training college, and then he went into Bishop Cotton School in Nagpur, and then he ultimately came to the Hyderabad Public School, which is a very good school in Hyderabad. And I was so fortunate, I keep saying ovarian lottery. So my dad becomes the vice principal and then the principal of the Hyderabad Public School, and I'm going into grade 9. And the only way I could have attended the public school was because my dad was vice principal. So it was very expensive, right? But as a son of the principal, vice principal, you could go right in.
Right.
So he was a huge influence on my life, and he didn't wear it on his sleeve, but just by his actions.
Let's talk about reading. You've often said that 2 books deeply influenced you in your life. What were the books, and how did they shape you? How did they influence you?
The books that influenced me, I went to a business school and I learned about alphas and betas and all of that, Ramesh. This is 74. And I got my first job, and my boss said, I went for a year, I don't want you to talk about that. I want you to read Ben Graham's Security Analysis of the Intelligent Investor. for me, road to Damascus, Ramesh. I
Really?
changed it dramatically. That's what I wanted to do. Liked it so much that I told my wife, if we have a son, that I'd like to call him
You're
Ben.
going to name him Ben. Right.
And we called him Ben.
Great. And what was the second book that...
The second book was books by John Templeton, who was, when I was 28 years old, never knew him, wrote a letter. John Templeton was a world-class investor, and I read his book, and I got to meet him, just sent a little note, got to meet him, and he, like, this is John Templeton, he's like 70 years old, and I read some guy is writing a letter to him, and he took the time to meet me, and thus began a 30-year relationship.
Amazing
Huge
story.
impact on my life.
It had broken 1,000 for the first time on November 14th. So it didn't finally break it for another 14 years, another decade, in 1982. But for the first time it hit 1,000. Watergate, Godfather were some of the buzzwords in America. But you arrived with all of how many dollars in your pocket?
I had $8 in my pocket, Ramesh, no money at all. And I would go to university and I'd see these people having lunch in the cafeteria. And I'd say, I had a doggy bag with some sandwiches with my sister-in-law made. And I'd say, they must be very wealthy, eating in the cafeteria, $2, $3, $4. And couldn't afford to go to McDonald's, and neither could we afford to go and see a movie. But having said all of that, we were very happy. You know, in my second year, MBA school is 2 years. My second year, I married my wife. We didn't have any money to come to India, so she came over. We got married in my brother's house. I think there might have been 20 people there, and not a typical Indian wedding. But we never knew any different. Very happy.
You've often said that you liked being an immigrant because there was no way but up being an immigrant.
Yes.
How did Canada shape you? Wide open spaces, rugged individualism.
Huge, Ramesh. A really good question. I tell my children that they have a major negative. They can't be immigrants because they were born in Canada. I came as an immigrant, and, you know, when you come to a new country and you've got no money, like Ramesh was saying, you only got one place to go up, but you develop qualities that you never had. You develop, I was pretty shy, and I wasn't, extroverted, but you have to make your way in this world. They all look different from you, and but you adjust, and it develops a lot of good qualities in you. I think it's a wonderful experience, Ramesh, being an immigrant.
Prem, let's talk about your investing philosophy.
Yeah.
All right, so our audience can understand that. You called it your road to Damascus moment when you discovered Benjamin Graham.
Yeah.
Tell me how did that romance begin? How did Benjamin Graham influence you?
So Ben Graham influenced me with a very simple two concepts. One, margin of safety. That when you buy an investment, you should try to have a margin of safety. So if you think it's worth here, you try to buy it here, below what it's worth.
You give a good example, Prem, about margin of safety by talking about Roman architecture. Can you share that story with us?
Oh, that's a lovely story. So the margin of safety is illustrated by, if you go to Europe, many of you have been there, you'll see the remnants of old Roman bridges. You'll see the bridges there, 2,000 years old. And the reason they've lasted for so long is that the guy who designed the bridges, he had to go underneath that bridge before the traffic went. Made sure that, he's going standing underneath, made sure that the bridge was well constructed. So in a similar way, we think, Ramesh, if you are a big shareholder in a company and you're running it, and it's a lot of your money's in it, that you'd be careful to make sure that you don't lose it all. And so we like the idea of margin of safety. That was the first one. And the second one is a simple idea that the stock market doesn't have a clue about the value of a company. Sometimes it's hugely optimistic, sometimes it's hugely pessimistic. What you try to do is take advantage of that. When it's hugely optimistic, perhaps lighten up. When it's hugely pessimistic, you buy the shares from it. And
You get greedy
rest of the
and-
time, forget about it. Don't worry about the stock price.
Prem, you've picked stocks for 50 years, across continents, across companies. If I asked you, summarize your investing philosophy for us, how you look at investing, could you give me a quick summary of that?
We're contrarian. So we've invested in, we went and invested in Ireland. Ireland went through a major problem.
In 2008.
2008, 9, and particularly in 2011. All the banks bankrupt, except one bank.
Bank of Ireland.
Bank of Ireland. Standing but teetering. And we met the Bank of Ireland, Richie Boucher, the guy who was running it. Terrific guy, really liked him. And we said, I went and met him with our people, and we said we'd invest. He said, how much? I said, 300, 350 million euro. And he says, that's terrific, but the government will still have a big percentage. So I said, how much money do you need? He said, about 1.5 billion euro. So long story short, we got 3 partners, ourselves, and 3 Capital Research, Capital Research, Fidelity, and Wilbur Ross, as it happens, put the money in. And the government was reduced to 25% or 23%, so no big impact. And this guy did a fantastic job.
How's that investment done?
So it's gone from like 10 in 10 euro cents to about 38 cents, and we might have sold it at 33, 32.
Prem, once a stock picker, always a stock picker. Do you enjoy picking stocks? Is that still your passion in life? Picking great companies?
Yes. That's what I love to do, Ramesh. I'm a chairman and CEO of a company, but I delegate the running of the insurance companies to the best people that we can find. When we began, you put your hand up, we gave it to you. But today we got some terrific guys running our company. And I like to spend a lot of time reading annual reports and investing. That's my passion.
You read annual reports from companies across the world?
I do. I do.
How many do you estimate you read in a year?
50, 75, 100. The ones that I like, a whole ton of them. Ones we've invested in and the ones that we are potential.
None that you've done. Okay.
Yeah, like when we bought this company in Allied World in New York, I read every annual report. Annual reports are a great way to read because it's a paper trail. They can't change what they said 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. So you go read that and you find out a lot about the company.
Prem, let me take you through some of your, what I consider great investment calls. Let's go through 2 of them. You have many. And you've said that predicting rain doesn't count. Building an ark does.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
People don't know this generally, but you profited handsomely from the mortgage crisis that happened in the world.
Yeah.
You built an ark. What did you see? When did you see this mortgage crisis building? And then how did you position your company to profit from it? Take us through some color for that.
Yeah, so people say that it was very difficult to see the real estate crisis, Ramesh, in the United States. But 2005, we saw it in 2004, 5. House prices were going up, not only in New York, Boston, but all over the United States. Going up and up and up, and banks were lending money like it was an ATM machine in the United States. And what was interesting was the rating agencies were rating these collateralized mortgage bonds
At AAA.
as a AAA. And there's 5 or 6 companies in the world that are AAA, less than 10. And there's like thousands of structures that are rated AAA. They don't have a CFO, they don't have any management, and they're rated AAA. So we never bought any of them, but we thought one day, this would come to roost. And so we bought something called, we didn't issue them, we bought credit default swaps.
CDS is
CDS,
yes.
which would benefit if there was a problem.
How do you discover them? How do you discover CDS?
I've got 2 people I've worked for 40 years. One is a guy called Brian Bradstreet. He's a fixed income guy. He came up with the idea. And Roger Lace is a stock guy like me. So we've all worked together for a long time. So he came up with the idea. And we bought and bought and bought. I remember we bought it at, let me see, we bought it in 2004, 5, and 6. And at the end of 2006, it was down, whatever we put. These are 7-year instruments, but mark to market.
Yes.
They were down 75%.
Right.
So I said in our annual report, we took a deep breath and bought some more. And in 07, 08, it went through the roof. Might have made in that 7, 8, 4 or 5 times what we put in. Changed the context of our company.
Prem, were you trying to save an iconic Canadian company?
Yes.
In buying BlackBerry, or were you looking at, you could make tons of money in this? What was your call at that time?
So on BlackBerry, it was an iconic Canadian company. The founder, Mike Lazaridis, asked me to be on the board. A year later, he left, and the company's revenue was going like this. They were losing $1 billion. Tough position, but they had about $2 billion in cash. And I left the board, and they were looking at the alternatives. And so we had a small investment, not big, but I went and identified, fortunately, a guy by the name of John Chen.
Of course.
Terrific track record, done it before. Talked to John. John said, this is a company that's iconic. I've followed it all my life. I own every single BlackBerry. I don't think it should go bankrupt. Long story short, and he made a lot of money and a couple of other things. But he came on board, and we bought $500 million of a convertible debenture, which has been a very good instrument for us.
How does the future look for BlackBerry?
So BlackBerry's future is, this is a classic, right? You've got a guy called John Chen. First thing he does, everyone's saying this company is going bankrupt. He says, in 9 months to a year, I'm going to make it break even. Cash-wise, another year, earnings-wise, and then I'm going to see what happens. 3 years down the road, break even, $2.5, $3 billion in cash, and he's got a whole bunch of opportunities in front of him. He no longer makes the phone. All of the software, outsourced it. It's an Android, but the software is in. Got terrific opportunity in the automobile business.
Let's come back to India, all right? Because you have an Indian audience. You once compared a Prime Minister, Mr. Modi,
yes,
to Lee Kuan Yew.
Yeah.
What are the similarities between those two people?
The big similarity, I thought, Ramesh, was humility and a focus not on themselves, not to make money for themselves. Lee Kuan Yew used to rent his house, but everything for the country. That's the big similarity. Huge focus on doing well for the people of Singapore, and in the case of Mr. Modi now, for the people of Gujarat for 13 years, and now for the people of India. 4 or 5 hours sleep, as you know, and otherwise focus on what's good. All decisions are not going to be something that we all agree on, but you know that there's no agenda. This man is focused on doing what's good for this country, and many prime ministers could have that, but he knows what works because he's got a track record. And so I see that similarity, and I really, as I said before, I think India is blessed to have a leader like that.
As blessed as we are, what reforms would you like India to take so that we could move from being a third world country to becoming, say, the third largest economy in the world? What are the reforms that you are looking for? Or are the reform process over now?
So my sense is, what you need to do is all the entrepreneurs, let the entrepreneurs create companies, jobs, right? Sort of get out of the way, which is what he's doing. He's taking out the restrictions and he's, opening it up so you can buy whatever you want outside and bring it in here. It used to be you had so many regulations, you had licenses. All of that is slowly but steadily going. And so 10% economic growth in this country, very soon you're the third largest.
Modi is the man to do it?
Modi is the man to do it. I really do believe. I think you have two risks, of course, that Modi, for whatever reason, has a health problem, or Modi is, has a problem like Indira Gandhi had. But barring that, and of course he has to get elected, I just think India is in a and you can't recognize these things when you're right there. because you're living it day by day. You read the press. I was reading the papers, and India has got a beautiful democracy. You got pluses, you got minuses. People are debating and talking about, and you got so many newspapers. I don't think there's a country with the number of newspapers that
And
you
that's
have.
thriving. The print business is doing fine. Thank you.
Huge. And the television stations we have here is like, 100, 150. So there's a ton of debate. And but if you step back, I think the underlying fundamentals are very good.
But does democracy make India stronger? Or do you feel that a Chinese model sometimes leads to better and more prosperous growth?
I used to think that. I used to think for India, there's no way you'd get a good leader to come in, and you wouldn't get a majority owner. So I thought maybe you needed the Chinese system, dictatorship. But Mr. Modi has proven that you don't need that. And when you compare China and India, I was just saying it to a few people here, Ramesh, if you go into China, all of the roads are good, shopping centers are terrific, you got trains, you got the terrific airport. We think the problems are hidden, meaning they can take away your company,
Intellectual property,
or just your company for whatever reason, put some tariffs on you. There's no rule
jail
of law.
No rule of law.
Rule of law, right? In India, you come for many times now. We have the Bangalore International Airport, beautiful airport. But used to be the airports were not very good, and you see roads with all sorts of potholes, and buildings are dilapidated. We thought the opportunity was hidden. And if you did a little work, and we've been doing that for 25 years, and, the opportunity in India was terrific. I mean, Deepak Parekh is sitting right here. HDFC's track record over 30 years is second to none. There's no bank, no company. Very few companies
Probably
have
the
grown
best in the world. I mean, Deepak Parekh's... I don't think there's a company like that in the world.
Deepak was the founder, and Deepak had the same type of principles as he'll say sometimes. He doesn't say it often, but as Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, they weren't trying to make money for themselves. They're trying to build a good company for the long term. And it's a phenomenal, in rupee terms, it's 30% compounded. In US dollar terms, even though the currency during that time period depreciated 70%, 25% compounded. It's an outstanding record right here in front of you.
HDFC Bank is up 400 times in the last 20 years. 400 times. So.
Which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And we are very blessed, Ramesh, to have him on our board. So we don't do anything without talking to him.
Thank you. So nice to have Mr. Parekh here. You've often said Deepak Parekh is one of the great CEOs, but no CEO has ever left you.
Yeah.
Why is that? How do you judge that?
Yes, that's a good question, Ramesh. It's a question, why have no CEOs left us in 32 years? The key reason is we're very decentralized. So we've got about 20,000 people in our company, 20,000 people in the property casualty insurance business. But we've only got 35 people, Ramesh, in the head office. So there's no time for that 35 people to go and check into and give people who are running our companies problems. So what happens is these people are running it like, even though we own 100%, if you were running our company, it's like your company. You've hired the CFO. You've hired the market. How can you leave, right? So that's the first. The fact that it's decentralized, people are empowered, and they're able to do what they want, and they become really good performers. And on the other hand, second is compensation. But compensation is, most of our guys can make more money outside. And in North America, quite usually you can make a little 10%, 20%, they leave. We've never had that. We've had people who've been with us 20 years, 25 years.
Why?
So because of this. And the culture that we have of treating people well. We've got I'm biased, so take this with a ton of salt, but we've got a terrific culture of treating people well. It's a nice culture.
Nice culture there.
Ramesh.
Fair enough. Before I move on to your lessons in life, you sit in Toronto. You look at India. What sectors attract your attention in India? I mean, you've invested in financial services.
Yeah.
You've invested in travel.
Yeah.
What are the sectors that you feel are the most promising opportunities in India?
Yeah, so I've been asked that many, many times, Ramesh. And what I say is, we're looking for honest, hard-working people with a track record, irrespective of sector, and who don't want to sell their company in 3 or 4 or 5 years, who want to build it. We're averse to selling, building the company. You become short-term if you're wanting to sell it in 3 years or 4 years. So people who have built the company, like Nirmal Jain and Venkat, are classics, right? They built their company over 20 years, and they want to continue to build it. That's what we're looking for.
That's what you're looking
That's
for.
what we're looking
Entrepreneurship.
for. And entrepreneurship.
Right.
And irrespective of sector. So we've got grain management, we've got financial services, we've got an airport. And the other thing is we don't come top down. We don't say we want to buy the Bangalore International Airport. Till 2 years ago, if you had asked us, we'd have said, we don't really know too much about the airport business. But things came along, they wanted to sell it. The founder, the promoters wanted to sell it. Deepak Parekh was instrumental for us, and we worked in a deal that was good for them. And the guy running it today, Hari Marar, been running it for 10 years, is going to make Bangalore, it's already a very good airport. We had a dinner last night, and they were telling me that in terms of in and out, you can't beat the Bangalore International Airport.
It's a fabulous airport.
But Ramesh, he's focused on building one of the world's best airports in India.
Thank you. One of the world's best investors, of course, is your friend, Sir John Templeton.
Yes.
What have you learned from Templeton? First, about investing.
Okay, Templeton was an interesting because I learned a lot from him on investing, but I also learned on religion because
about life.
You'll come on investing. His big thing, Ramesh, was flexibility. Don't be rigid. Don't have one way of looking at, all companies below book value, all companies below 10 times earnings, all those type of rules. 5% yield. I'm not gonna buy anything unless it's 5%. Just be flexible. And flexible in terms of investing in real estate and investing potentially in mortgages, investing all over the world. He invested all over the world.
He was the first one into Japan, for example,
yes.
in the 60s.
Yes, he was.
Templeton.
Yeah.
But he was also a deeply religious person, Templeton.
Yeah.
How did he impact your life? Not markets, but how you've lived your life.
Yes.
Has Templeton influenced that?
Okay, so Templeton impacted my life huge for 30 years. Initially, I'd go only and talk to him about investments, and then I shifted and I talked to him about religion, and I talked to him about. He instituted a prize called the Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion. Religion, broadly defined. So, Hindu has won it, the Muslims won it, the Buddhists have won that prize. He felt every religion could teach you something about God, who's infinite. You'll never know everything, but all of the religions point towards God. And he was an exceptional man. And when you met him, Ramesh, you would think the humblest guy you've met, like a saint, very, very humble. And I just learned a ton from him.
It is rumored that you have a statue of him, a bust of him in your boardroom?
Yes, we do. Not a statue, but a
bust.
A bust of his face. On my 50th birthday, unknown to me, my partners went to Mr. Templeton, made him pose for a week, and made a bust. They hired a very good sculptor, made a bust of him, and gave him 2 copies, one for Mr. Templeton, one for us, and I've got it in my boardroom.
And
he died at the age of 95 about 10 years ago. Okay. So it's for us, we're all, in my whole company, the investment side, we're all Templeton fans. Yes. So for us, it's a very valuable piece.
Before I ask you the final few questions, we are all products of World War II. Bretton Woods, free markets, trade, immigration. Do you sense after Trump, the world is changing on its axis, that 20 years from now, the world will be different than it is today? And to be good investors, we need different specs. We need to think differently. Do you think the world is changing of investment?
Yeah, and you never see these changes till they actually happen. And so there's a risk that, world trade collapses. But he has a lot of very smart people there, Ramesh. And he says something here, but he changes very quickly, For example, on that Keystone Pipeline, he did say, Keystone Pipeline going from Canada to the United States, we have to buy U.S. steel. Only U.S. steel. They're not going to allow any big headlines, U.S. steel. Steel manufactured in the United States. Someone went and told them that 18-inch diameter pipe, the United States doesn't manufacture that. And by the way, we've already bought a lot of steel, which is not from the United States. So in a very small place, a week or two later, it said that for the Keystone Pipeline, all steel will be available. So he changes, and as a lot of the headlines have been on his immigration policies. But when Silicon Valley needs people and is short of people, I think you'll see him change again.